Welcome back to another edition of Tidal Flooding Talk, where it's not the triumvirate. It's Palma and I again, as Joe is either taking meteorological summer off and we'll see him back after Labor Day, or he's just really under the weather and hopefully we'll see him back next week. But no worries, we got you covered. I'm meteorologist Dan Skeldon, along with my co-host Palma Shiles. Palma, how are you doing on this fine June day?
I'm doing great. I'm getting ready for summer. It's great. How about you, Dan?
Good. Air temperatures are warming up. The ocean temperatures are warming up. We're kind of entering the peak of summer season, right? Because schools are basically ending or already having ended in Pennsylvania. I know my kids wrapped up June 8th, which is great. I know they're still going on in parts of New Jersey, but as soon as school's out, that's it. You are in peak summer season. July 4th and Night in Venice weekend and all that other stuff. And it hums right on through Labor Day.
Yep. It's like as soon as 4th of July is over, it feels like you blink and it's Labor Day. So I just got to take it all in while it's here.
Yep. Now Palma's oftentimes surrounded by meteorologists. And not only is Joe Martucci and myself a meteorologist, so she's in the minority as the non-meteorologist host, but sometimes we really want to torture her and bring on a meteorologist guest as well. She handles it all in stride. She's awesome, even when she's outnumbered. But this week, we turned the tables because not only did she take one meteorologist out, Joe Martucci, right? So she's only stuck with me. But we're bringing in a guest right up her wheelhouse, her strength right here. And we're going to bring in Jay Dilworth. And Jay, welcome to Tidal Flooding Talk. Great to have you on. And thanks for being here. First time on the show, right?
It's my pleasure. First time online. It's been many years since we met at the Irish pub face to face. It seems like eons ago, but it's still the same subject, Dan. We talk about tidal flooding and how it relates to construction.
Well, looking forward to having that conversation with you over the next 30 minutes or so. So again, welcome.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah, Jay Dilworth, I've known since I started working in the construction industry. He worked as the plumbing inspector in Margate. But now he has a third-party code agency that performs inspections and plan review and all things uniform construction code related for towns. Could you expand on that, Jay? What do you see as a third-party agency as the one you have? What does it do?
Yeah, sure, Palma. In New Jersey, there's basically three options for your construction office. It's just you would hire your own personnel. You would employ a third-party agency, whole or impartial, or the state of New Jersey would take over the construction office. So in my industry, there's a small little niche that third-party agencies can fit into in New Jersey, whether it be one single discipline. Like you said, I used to work with you in Margate for plumbing. Maybe Margate would need a plumbing inspector and they've exhausted all their options and can't find one. So you give me a call and I can provide you a plumbing inspector. It may be a town that would like to have a third party do building, plumbing, electric, and fire, not provide vehicles, not provide health care, just turn it over to an agency. So there's many, many options for a third party in the state of New Jersey.
So you kind of answered the question. So that's why municipalities kind of hire third party agencies, right? You can kind of fill that niche sometimes, right?
Correct, Dan. Yeah, depending on the needs and the availability of their own personnel, that's where a third party would come into play.
Do I talk a little bit, Jay, about the difference about construction officials, construction officials versus subcode officials versus inspectors, plane reviewers, kind of the different differences in those roles?
Sure. So your construction official is the administrator of the office. He oversees your 5 technical subcodes, which are building, plumbing, electric, fire, and elevator, and also your technical personnel, such as Palma's position. So he's the overall head of the office. And of course, underneath him, like I stated, you'd have your building subcode official, electric, plumbing, fire protection, and elevator. And then if you are a larger municipality, you would also have inspectors.
So Jay is also a certified floodplain manager. At what point in your career did you decide to obtain that certification? And then when did it really become significant to, influence construction as well?
The building code, the International Building Code, has a small reference to flood resistant construction. Early in my career, 40 years ago, it was maybe overlooked because people really didn't think too much about elevating structures. But I was in a local municipality, had flood hazard area, and it became apparent that myself and the construction official at that time needed to be better versed in the requirements. So we took a class with Clayton Smith, who I'm sure you both know. Clayton's well known in South Jersey for his classes. So we did Clayton's class. We took our test. We passed our test, and then we started to implement the requirements of the building code, which at that time was only 1 foot of freeboard. And when you know that that's going to be a basis of a flood insurance policy or a premium, you really take a look at that and make sure that you're accurate with building height.
Yeah, very good. We're going to take our first break now, and come back and talk a lot more constructions and codes and everything else. Again, this is Palma's wheelhouse here, and we're going to come back and talk about it with Jay Dilworth. So stay tuned on Tidal Flooding Talk.
Thanks to the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, your flood insurance bills are lower and your streets safer from the reality of flooding. Since beginning in 2013, we build more resilient shoreline communities. Our member towns develop and share in best practices that anticipate future concerns and create flooding solutions. From our town-specific free web app for flooding information to our weekly Tidal Flooding Talk show, we focus on flooding 24/7. Visit www.njcoastalcoalition.com for more.
Hello and welcome back. You are watching Tidal Flooding Talk. We are brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, and we would like to remind our viewers to check before you build or renovate. Before starting any construction or renovations, contact your local building department to find out if permits are required. Floodplain development regulations are in place to protect your home and community. Work done without proper permits can lead to violations or worse, increased flood risk.
And we're back with Jay Dilworth. And Jay, I have two questions for you coming back in our second segment here. First of all, as a third-party agency, I was just wondering how big of an area do you cover? Like how far do you go to do what you do?
Personally, Dan, I cover Cape May, Atlantic, and Ocean counties. I go from, say, the Wildwoods to Long Beach Island.
Okay, that's a lot of real estate and, a lot of houses in there, and I'm sure that keeps you very busy. And the second part of the question is just wanted to get a little bit about evolution of flood codes here over the years in your profession and how both the Uniform Construction Code and flood regulations have changed over your years of doing this.
Dan, I think what's changed the most is the reduction in the flood insurance, your premiums, which is really the motivating factor behind the flood elevation of structures, determination of substantial damage, making sure that your existing structures, your crawl spaces are at the same grade, your flood vents are no more than 12 inches above grade. All that has come about en masse, really, since Sandy. And Palma has lived it like I have. There's been such a push in the last 14 years that we've seen. And of course now we're dealing with the real requirements, the resilient environments and landscapes, which is basically instead of your 1 foot DFE, in some cases you have your 4 feet. And I think we're going to see a big change in the marriage of FEMA requirements and the Uniform Construction Code.
Now, when you are hiring your inspectors, Jay, and they're going to work in different towns across the shore, do you make sure that they are aware of flood regulations, and also do they have to learn the specific town's rules, or at least what to look out for?
Well, Palma, there's a reason it's called the Uniform Construction Code. It is supposed to be uniform from town to town, but we all know that that's not the case in a lot of places. So to answer the first part of your question, absolutely. We all need to know the difference between our base flood elevations, our design flood elevations. Now we have our cafe elevations. The IRs, Z zones now that are coming. It's imperative that everybody knows these requirements from electrical, you know, for your services, for your HVAC, for your equipment, to your building guys, for breakaway walls, flood vents, all the other requirements that go along. And there are a lot of inland municipalities that don't have wave action like we have. Now they have riverine, fluvial, but they just don't have the same requirements as the shore does.
And Jay, you said Sandy, was just kind of a turning point and just a huge change in the standards. The standards were significantly strengthened and rightfully so. And communities continue to strengthen those standards. I guess my question to you is that something that will never stop? As Mother Nature continues to do as she does, are the standards going to be continuously strengthened over the years? Or say you get another bad storm, you see another surge in the strengthening? Is it just or do you eventually reach a point where you're as strong as you can be?
That's a good question, Dan. I don't know where it ends, but I can say that I saw with Palma, we saw the Back Bay come in. That's where we had the majority of our damage in Margate. And then, of course, I worked in Long Beach Township, which has the Holgate section. I saw the ocean come through, and the breakaway walls did exactly what they were designed to do. The piling stayed in place after the storm. They brought sand back in, and those structures are as good as new. So the current code requirements we have now that we're building under, they work. I can attest to that.
So, going back a little bit to the flood requirements and how they relate to the UCC or the building code, how, in all of the towns that you work in, how close together do the floodplain administrator and the zoning officer and your construction offices work together?
Well, Palma, they have to work hand in hand. There's no other way that the whole system works. Number one, if a town doesn't have a designated CFM, certified floodplain manager, or somebody responsible for floodplain, it defaults to the construction official. So right there, you have someone in the building department that's responsible for enforcing the floodplain regulations. So I don't know of any town where, say, the floodplain administrator is not within earshot or within a couple offices away from the construction office.
Jay, could you provide some examples where, like, both sets of regulations, we're talking like FEMA regulations and the UCC codes, will apply? Like any sample projects we have to be concerned about both?
Well, I mentioned about flood vents. I mentioned the crawl space level being even with the outside ground level. That's all dealt with in the building code, the IBC, International Building Code. So we're very consistent with FEMA and the building code. Now, the building code will get you started. FEMA will pick it up and take you to the finished project.
Very good. We're going to be back and take our final break. Coming back on the other side, Jay, going to talk a little bit about the future of floodplain management and have some lighthearted questions for you. at the end of the show as well. So stay tuned. Palma and I, with Jay Dilworth, we'll be right back for the final segment of this week's Tidal Flooding Talk.
Base flood elevation is the level floodwaters are expected to reach in a major storm. Building below it puts your home at risk. Building just 1 foot above it can significantly lower flood insurance costs and reduce flood damage. And don't forget to elevate mechanical equipment like air conditioners and generators. Small changes can make a big difference. This message is brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition.
Well, welcome back to this week's Tidal Flooding Talk, along with my co-host, Palma Shiles. We've been chatting with Jay Dilworth. Now, just talking off camera, Jay, 40 years in the business, if you will. A happy anniversary. You definitely longevity and have seen a lot in your 40 years. But we want to look ahead, say, at where we're going in the future of floodplain management. And I guess, what are the couple of the big ways communities are adapting to rapidly changing climate and conditions along the shore?
Well, Dan, I think the biggest thing to come along since I've been in this business is this latest act that was just passed, the REAL, and I'll say it again, it's the Resilient Environments and Landscapes requirement that was passed by Governor Murphy. And basically it requires 4 feet above finished floor, which basically is your 5 feet above block. And that is causing a lot of problems from municipality to municipality. And that's probably the biggest change that I have seen in my years in this business.
And I guess, do you think that's why a lot of I think at least 1 or 2 counties is fighting the rules? So I guess, do you think that's why the major jump with the 4 feet? Is that what's pushing, the pushback there?
Yeah, Palma, I absolutely agree. We had the January 20th, 26th adoption. The July 20th, 26th is our 6 months. And now we know that was just extended another year until July 20th of 2027. So that anything that has been submitted, a complete, in quotes, a complete application that's been submitted may be able to be reviewed under the old requirements. So that's going to help a little bit. And you are correct. I believe there are some challenges from several counties to this rule. And it varies from town to town because it also affects zoning. Palma, as you know, in Margate, the building code regulates height. A height of a structure, say in 5B construction, which is your standard wood construction, standard building, it can only be 35 feet above grade. If you take and add another 4 feet to that structure, that will basically eliminate a third story. So now look forward to someone buying a home oceanfront. They've paid a lot of money. They want to max out their lot. When they bought it, they were able to go 3 stories. Now with the real requirements, they can only squeeze in 2 stories. That's a real detriment to construction at the shore in some municipalities. There are towns that have a floating building height where regardless of where the first floor goes, then they start their 35 feet from there. So the 4 feet is not going to bother them. What will bother them is they will exceed the 35 feet from grade, or if it's fire resistant construction, it's 55 feet. So that may necessitate residential sprinkler systems having to be installed to get these homes built as high as they need to be in some municipalities. So there's a big change coming in the world of construction in coastal communities.
Wow. So it may impact zoning, and then it also may impact your construction methods and restrictions. So yeah.
Absolutely. Another example, take it for example, you've raised this building 4 or more feet, and now you've got a set of stairs that have to come down the front to the sidewalk. They can't fit them in. So you have to come out to a landing. Your stairs have to go sideways. There's a lot of towns that zoning does not permit that. So not only do we have the marriage of the real rules in the state of New Jersey, FEMA, UCC, now zoning really has to get involved. And some towns are resistant to change zoning to marry up with the building code. So it's causing some pushback.
And Jay, do you think that the real aside, are the current standards enough, or or are we opening a can of worms here, or are these additional changes necessary going forward?
So Dan, I'm not a meteorologist. I don't have any of the studies in front of me. I know what the projections are. I go to the flood conference every year and I see all the studies. So I know that we're planning out to 2100, but I think where we are right now is sufficient. And that's just my opinion. I watched it work. I watched it work through Sandy. Now, maybe if there's a stronger storm, we may have a problem, but Sandy was quite devastating for the coast. And the structures that were built to today's standards were dry, and if they had breakaway walls, it worked.
Real quick, could
Okay.
you explain breakaway walls and when they're required?
Sure, we'll just call it along the shore, which is your V zones where you have wave velocity, and then we have what's called a coastal A zone, which is most times along the bayside. Coastal A zone needs to be a coastal A zone construction home needs to meet V zone requirements. And V zone requirements are breakaway walls. That means typically we're on piers, we're on pilings, and if that first level is enclosed, it needs to be enclosed with a structure that at some point of force, the walls will break away and allow the structure to stay in place.
So I guess my
Okay.
next question would be for our viewers. Do you know your, and if you don't, look it up.
You absolutely should. All right, Jay, we're gonna wrap things up with kind of a rapid fire round, a lightning round, if you will. 40 years in your trade now. Most common code violation you see?
Not enough flood vents.
Okay. What is the most common permit myth?
Good question, Palma. The most common permit myth, I'm going to say, is not particularly for the permit, it's the construction office in general. That the construction office in general is not for the consumer. And that couldn't be further from the truth.
Absolutely.
I agree with that.
What's the biggest mistake you think, in your opinion, contractors make?
Not knowing the current code. You know, Dan, with the availability of a computer and iPhone, it takes 1 minute to check what you should be doing. Whether my 2x4 needs to be 16 inches on center, 1 foot on center. There are so many answers that can be found online, or as Palma knows, a phone call. All they need to do is make a phone call. And in honesty, the younger people that are building, they've been taught by somebody that's older. And the older people, we hear it all the time. I've been doing this forever. So they assume that because they've been doing it forever, it's correct. And it's not.
So you blamed both generations, it sounds like.
Yeah.
You said both the young and the old.
Yeah. At least the younger generation, Palma, has the availability of an iPhone.
Okay. All right. So what is one thing that you feel like every homeowner should know before they start their project?
Are we talking new construction?
You could say new construction, and you could say for just a renovation. 2 parts.
Okay, well, so let's start renovation, and we're assuming that we're in a flood zone. So we need to know: is this a substantial improvement? Am I going to have to elevate? Number one question you need to know. If it's a new home, you still need to do your due diligence and make sure that you are being built at the proper elevation. You do not want to go and get a CO and you get your first insurance premium and it's $13,000 a year. where it could be 2,500.
Yeah.
Just since we're talking flood issues, those are the two things that really need to happen. And it's very easy to verify.
All right, Jay. One, my final quick question for you. One code requirement people complain about, but it actually makes perfect sense, and maybe they should bite their tongues.
My hot water can't be any more than 120 degrees at my bathtub. That's not hot enough for me to take a shower.
And what is
That's a good
that?
one.
An anti-scald device or something,
An
right, Jay?
anti-scald device or a mixing valve will take care of that easily, Palma.
I've seen that on a list of plumbing inspection failures before. So
All right, Palma wraps us up with the last question, and
okay. If you could change one thing about the public understanding of flood requirements, what would it be?
As far as them having knowledge or getting more knowledge, what exactly do you mean,
Maybe
Palma?
just like a misconception of the floodplain requirements as they are today.
Well, I think 50% of homeowners think they're ridiculous, that they're too restrictive. It's never going to happen to my house, and that's always a complaint. And of course, when they get their plans drawn and they see how their home looks from the outside, the elevation, of course they complain to their architect. And of course, the architect will always say, that's the requirement in your town. So you know that you get the visit at the counter. Why do I have to have my house so high? And then, of course, we have to say, because it's for your own protection. And sometimes that's tough for them to hear.
yeah. All right. We're talking with Jay Dilworth. You're striving for 50 years in the business, and we hope if you make it to 50, you're definitely not a stranger. You're back on Tidal Flooding Talk sometime in the next 10 years.
Thank you so much for the invitation once again. I really enjoyed it. My pleasure.
And Jay, how can people reach out to you if they do want to seek out, a third party? How could people reach you?
Dan, it's very easy. Jay Dilworth at TrinityCodeInspections.com.
Okay. And again, thanks for tuning into this week's Tidal Flooding Talk. My forecast, and I'm, as much as a meteorologist shouldn't guarantee, I'm going to guarantee this forecast. We will have Joe Martucci back with us next week after a 2-week absence. Palma Shiles and I thank you for watching this week's Tidal Flooding Talk, and we'll see you back here soon. All right. That should be good.